All right, what's happening, y'all? It's your boy Rico from Street Scores, and of course, we're coming with the training camp breakdown for the Washington Commanders 2023 off-season, man. Today is day 8. I'm really excited. Today was Sam Howell's best day. We got to talk about that. He was throwing some deep bombs today, but we also got to preface with the fact that players weren't going full speed. This was the day off from pads. They had pads on Tuesday, Wednesday, and they're going to have them again Friday, but they did not have them today, as in Thursday, August 3rd. So keep that in mind when we talk about a lot of the things going on today. Today, were pads off once again, like some of the earlier training camp practices where it's kind of hard to get a full, accurate grasp of how good players are or how bad they are and things like that. So, and then also today, it was a lot of starters versus backups throughout the majority of the day. So starting offense versus the backup defense, backup offense versus the starting defense, all of that type of stuff. So I wanted to give y'all all of that info before we dive into this video. Also, we have a Jamin Davis update. We have a big time injury update because we finally have a severe injury throughout training camp for the first time. So it does kind of suck, but the show goes on. We also have some updates on who we signed to replace that guy, and then also some players that we brought in to sign or that tried out for us within the past 2 weeks that I didn't find the time to update y'all on yet. I'm gonna give y'all that at the end of the video as well. So before we dive into everything, of course, this is Rico of Street Scores, so we're gonna do a full breakdown of training camp. We're gonna talk about with the coaches, we're gonna talk about injury report, and we're gonna go position group by position group, starting with quarterbacks, then running backs, then wide receivers, all the way down to the DBs and even special teams, even though today we don't have any special teams updates, just to go ahead and give y'all that heads up. And so before we dive into all of that, make sure you stiff arm the like button, stiff arm the bell next to that subscription button, and stiff arm the subscription button, man. Make sure you stiff arm that as many times as you got to make sure that it works, man, because I'm coming with so much content, man. So many training camp videos, so many daily videos with the training camp clips. I'm coming with rookie film sessions soon once we start to have some downtime, all of that type of stuff, man. So I'm really excited about all of the content I'm hitting y'all with. Any breaking news, I have so many video ideas that I'm just waiting for the time to do it. So make sure y'all stay tuned. Without further ado, let's get it.
You tell your family you're gonna be a commander.
All right, so practice was at 9 a.m. per usual. That's how it's always going to be. And apparently y'all have good weather up there. We're still deep into the 90s here. And I've been seeing people in the comment section saying 90s? We're in the hundreds over here. So, man, hey, man, I feel for y'all. But shouts out to the DMV and everybody up there in the Northeast where y'all are no longer in the 90s anymore, man. I'm happy for our Commanders players that they don't have to practice in that heat, man. Shouts out to y'all. Whoo-wee, boy, because we're still in the thick of it down here. Humid, hot, all of that. But, of course, the Commanders have caught on with all of the video clips that have been uploaded from people attending the practices and things like that. They are really clamping down on things now. Like, today, they were everybody that I'm hearing that went to the practices saying that they really, really clamped down on it today. Like, as far as people recording the practices and things like that. So, just to go ahead and give y'all a fair warning that maybe for now on, we won't get as many specific details and updates. Now, we still have a lot to talk about. We still have things to say about every position group, literally other than just special teams. But it's just not going to be the same now that the Commanders are not playing. Now, granted, maybe they'll open things back up and after a while and let people record like they used to, but just to go ahead and give y'all that fair warning. And then also today, like already briefly mentioned in the intro, that today was a lesser day. First of all, this was their first day after having no pads. They had full pads, full contact, all of that for 2 days straight. This is their day off. They'll have pads on again tomorrow. And then also they usually practice for 2 hours, maybe even over 2 hours some practices, but today they only went a little over 90 minutes, an hour and a half. So, and then again, they weren't running at full speed. So again, just to preface all of that. Also, Antonio Gibson has an announcement for y'all. Here you go, right here.
You got a camera rolling? I need you to do me a favor. Stop. Keep rolling. I need you to make a post. Tell them to stop calling me Gibby. I don't know where they get that from. Get AG, Tony, anything but that. Gibby is not it.
And
So can y'all please stop calling him by that nickname? I've never called him that nickname. I never liked it. So, and I'm glad to hear that he agrees. He's no longer bro, y'all got to stop this. He's seen it enough. He's had enough. Can we chill out? So, and I can admit too, even just from his point of view, AG, Antonio Gibson, whatever you want to call him, sounds like he gets more yards per carry than Gibby. I don't know. Gibby just doesn't, even have a real ring to it. He sounds huggable. Like that don't sound like somebody that's about to run over some linebackers or anything like that. So I'm glad he addressed that. I never liked the Gibby thing. Now let's go ahead and move on to the coaches. Of course, Eric Bieniemy is usually going to be the talk of the town when it comes to the coaching section of all of these training camp breakdowns. We're rarely going to talk about Ron Rivera because, again, he's only doing like minimal micromanaging, moving from group to group, and more so just the motivator and the motivational speaker, the guy that keeps up the culture and stuff like that. But when it comes to X's and O's and things like that, Ron Rivera is really out of it. I mean, we look to him for press conference interviews, questions, certain analysis on certain players, but when it comes to during practice, we're far more entertained by what Eric Bieniemy has going on, especially since our defensive side of the ball, the majority of them have been playing with each other for like the past 4 years, just about, since Ron Rivera's been here for the most part. So a lot of the same usual faces overall. Offense is so many changing pieces, offensive line, quarterback, offensive coordinator. So we're always going to be intrigued by Eric Bieniemy just off of that alone. And then on top of that, he's a very entertaining personality. But of course, Eric Bieniemy has been pushing players all offseason since he got here, and the players love it. Curtis Samuel in this press conference after the practice even talked about how he loved it. And remember, Curtis Samuel was a victim of some Eric Bieniemy yelling a few practices ago as well when he didn't do something right. Eric Bieniemy got on him. He's gotten on Terry McLaurin a few times. He's gotten on everybody, the entire offense. He stays on Sam Howell's head, and he typically delegates a lot of the responsibility to him, even if somebody else may mess up, because he's the quarterback, he's the leader of the team, even if he is one of the youngest players on the team. Right? Eric Bieniemy doesn't care about none of that. But going back to Curtis Samuel said, quote, "You want someone that's going to be hard on you because you understand it's coming from a good place. Sometimes players need someone who's going to push them to the next level," unquote. And while you're winning, that's going to be the best case scenario. And Eric Bieniemy, a hard coach like that, that's perfect. Now, when you start losing, maybe players start to see it as nagging. But as of right now, when hopes are high, hopefully we get into the season, we start winning, because that coaching style of Eric Bieniemy is what brings the best out of players. Now, if you're a bad team, it's just going to be annoying. But if you're a good team, that's the exact type of coach you want. And hopefully we are a good team. It seems like we are, so I'm assuming it's going to work. And then we have a lot of great players at the very least. Terry McLaurin, Jonathan Allen, all these guys, they love how Eric Bieniemy is coaching this team. Even in the defensive side of the ball, they're feeling challenged by how much he's expecting the offense to go out there and perform against those guys. They're taking offense to it. Like, wait a minute, you do know we are like arguably the best defense in football coming up this season. Don't expect the offense to just run through us and dice us up and get touchdowns every now and then. So I just love how Eric Bieniemy is just bringing out greatness from everybody on the team one way or another. Also, shouts out to Zach Selby for this analysis. He brought up the point, and I completely agree, that the offense has been behind the defense in terms of development for most of the camp. That's mostly because the defense is in the 4th year of their system under Jack Del Rio, whereas the offense is still learning their new scheme, which, again, the point I made just a couple of minutes ago. But Rivera said that he is seeing growth from the unit in terms of running more complex concepts. So the offense is still behind the defense, understandably, like I already said, but Ron Rivera did speak on the fact that, hey, man, they're a little bit further ahead than I expected. They're already starting to get the complicated stuff that I didn't expect them to get to by day 8 of training camp. So that's really good to hear. I mean, he said, quote, "Eric is throwing a lot at him. He's not piecemealing it at all. He's not starting from the bottom. We're learning, and we're learning quickly." So Eric Bieniemy is expecting greatness out of these guys immediately. Now, moving on to some bad news. We're going to go ahead and get to the injury update. First of all, Sadiq Charles did return to practice today, and he's still dealing with the calf strain. But right now, he's day-to-day. But Chris Paul, as of right now, I don't know if it's because of Sadiq Charles' injury or if Chris Paul has completely earned it at this point. But Chris Paul was working with the ones pretty much all day today. Sadiq Charles is still dealing with his injury, and again, he's considered day-to-day as a final like breakdown, and Ron Rivera and the guys are going to keep looking at him, monitor him day by day and stuff like that. But again, Chris Paul is just starting guard right now. I don't know if Sadiq Charles is fully healthy, if he's not, but as of right now, Chris Paul is just starting left guard. Charles Leno, Chris Paul, Nick Gates, Samuel Cosme, Andrew Wiley. That's your offensive line. And then it's been reported that defensive tackle David Bada tore his triceps in practice Wednesday, which was yesterday, and that really sucks. Now, we are fortunate to have one of the deepest defensive lines in the NFL, but I'm still I feel really bad for David Bada. When I heard that, I felt really bad. He's one of the guys, he's one of the international players, and he always like makes an impact during the offseason, and it just seems like he was on his way to figuring it all out, but we'll just have to wait till next year. Just like my boy Armani Rogers at tight end, one of my favorite potential players on the team. He's out for season as well. Now we have 2 players that are on IR. We'll see how that goes, but David Bada is the first of training camp. And then so to replace him, we signed defensive tackle Curtis Brooks, but again, we'll talk about that later on in the video when we start to really dive into all of the guys we brought in. But just to do a quick little breakdown of Curtis Brooks, he was a 6th round pick in 2022 out of Cincinnati. He's a Virginia native as well, a local guy, which is why they probably had him on their radar this soon. And then also he has a 9.51 RAS score, very athletic guy. I mean, the only thing he tested poorly in was size. He's like a little underweight, little under height and stuff like that, but explosion, he was elite. Speed, he was great, and agility, he was great. So this is a high ceiling guy that's going to be really fun to see how he competes in camp. And the fact that he didn't come in for a tryout, he immediately got signed to the 90-man roster is really interesting. Granted, it's the 90-man roster, not the 53-man roster, so you don't want to think too deeply about it, but still, to immediately come in and get signed is interesting. They must have seen something there, and it was pretty quick, too. David Bada tore his triceps yesterday, and they brought in Curtis Brooks today. Like, they had him ready. Like basically on the waiting list. They must have like a list of guys that if there's an injury, we know who we're going to call. And again, the fact that he has a really high RAS score, you know, makes me optimistic about what he can contribute to this team. Maybe he'll flash and show a little something. Mason Brooks is balling out as an undrafted free agent right now on the offensive side of the ball. Maybe Curtis Brooks can be the defensive equivalent of that. We'll see though. Now getting to quarterback. Now today the Commanders really didn't do too many drills. They jumped right into 11s on 11s. So that's probably where a lot of the time that they saved today, where instead of practicing for over 2 hours, they practiced for like an hour and a half. They just cut down on drills and just ran a lot of 11 on 11, 7 on 7s and things like that. And then of course, like I already said, the starters were going against the backups. So starting O-line versus backup defense, starting defense versus the backup offense and all of that type of stuff. And then also on top of that, it was a lighter practice, but that boy Sam Howell looked really good today. Not gonna lie. Again, I want to preface with the fact that the players slowed down a little today. No pads. Players were moving at maximum 75%. Nobody was going 100. But Sam Howell at the same time had his best day of training camp so far. It was his most accurate day, and it was his most consistent day where it wasn't just flashes of greatness every now and then. He was generally good to great pretty much all day for the first time all training camp. And Eric Bieniemy finally also opened up the offense and allowed Sam Howell to take deep shots today, because yesterday I don't believe he attempted a pass further than 30 yards down the field, but today he allowed Sam Howell to open up and sling it, and it literally looked like week 18 versus the Cowboys last year. So, hey man, you open up that offense and allow Sam Howell to be a deep threat, allow him to be able to hit deep shots, and the defense has to worry about that. That's going to open things up underneath as well, especially when you're hitting the deep shots the way that he did, because he literally started off the 11 on 11 periods, his first 2 passes of the day, I believe, deep shots to Jahan Dotson and De'Ami Brown, all completed, perfect accuracy and everything like that. Sam Howell may be the complete opposite. He may be the type of guy where you got to throw deep shots first and then work underneath, rather than working underneath, getting a rhythm, and then taking the deep shots. He may need the deep shots to get his confidence up, because he's just naturally great at those, and then the short intermediate stuff he can get to after that. I don't know. He may be the exact opposite. I highly doubt Eric Bieniemy's going to do that, or if at the very least, if he does, it's not going to be the consistent majority type of time thing. But still, man, that's really interesting. And then he ended up going 4 for 4 on deep balls at a certain point in practice. Like he was just hitting everything he wanted to when it came to deep shots. That man was getting away with murder out there, bro. Again, no pads, defense not working as hard as they normally do 100%, but the passes were perfect and accurate to where even if the defense were moving as fast as they wanted to, or should be, if it were a real game scenario, those passes more than likely would have still been completed. And I mean, at the end of the day, this was basically a fancy walkthrough, so you don't want to take too much from these practices, because again, I keep prefacing with everything with how fast the players are moving, no pads and all that type of stuff. But at the same time, man, this guy balled out today under the conditions. So again, just want to repeat, slower day in general. So even though it was his best day, it was supposed to be by the way the practice was set up. So I'm not exactly sure how excited I should be about this being his best day, But I know at the very least we shouldn't be worried, because if he would have went out there in a practice scenario like this and didn't have his best day, that's when you start to have your antennas up and be like, I don't know, man, start to second guess Sam Howell a little bit. But he went out there and did what he was supposed to do. So you can't really knock him on the fact that the defense wasn't going 100%. And at the very least, you know that when he's supposed to have his best day, he does. And that's a good sign at the very least. It may not be the super hype that we want to have with them, but at the very least is a good sign. Also, from Logan Paulson, who was there every day at practice and a super film watcher on their Take Command podcast with Craig Hoffman, he said that Sam Howell looks 1,000,000,000% better than Wentz did at this point last year. So do with that as you will, because it's like, oh yeah, Carson Wentz, he was so bad. How much does better look than bad? But at the same time, man, to hear 1,000,000,000% from a guy that really knows football, that's great to hear and very encouraging. Now, moving on to the running back position, I mean, of course, you had the Antonio Gibson PSA, but also when it came to the second 11-on-11 session, they ran the ball a lot. They ran it more than they passed it. And it was first-team offense versus second-team defense, but still, I love the fact that we're starting to get that run game going. We're starting to install that part of the Eric Bieniemy offense. Again, the passing game is the most complicated, the most difficult to learn, takes the longest to adjust to, gain chemistry and stuff like that. So that's why we've been passing the ball, if not the majority of practice, even sometimes all of practice. But now we're starting to work on that run game a lot more every day. It will start to increase it and increase it and increase it, so that the running, I mean, that is going to be something that the running backs have to learn, like as far as the offensive line, how to block it, with the running backs, how to see the vision, how to when to make the cuts and things like that, certain things. So there's definitely an element of the run game we need to work on. The passing game just takes more work and more time, and I'm glad that we're finally starting to ramp it up and become a more balanced offense that doesn't only pass the ball in practice. Because if anything, at least it makes the defense have to play more balance and adjust to that, because they've been getting away with murder, knowing that Sam Howell's going to throw the ball every play without the threat of the run game. That's been making it easier for them to defend Sam Howell. And the fact that Sam Howell has still completed passes in those conditions is really interesting, and it has me optimistic about him as far as that goes as well. So now that the defense has to be more balanced, because they don't know if it's going to be a run or a pass, has made it easier for Sam Howell to deliver the ball, and also the running backs are becoming better running backs. And then also moving on to the receiver group, and nothing very noteworthy other than the fact that the catch of the day came from Marcus Kemp. So just to update y'all, like I've been saying, do not be surprised if those last two receiver spots, again, the first four are Terry McLaurin, Jahan Dotson, Curtis Samuel, and De'Ami Brown. Those are your four locks. We're probably only going to keep 5 or 6. So those last two may be the ex-Chiefs with Byron Pringle and Marcus Kemp. So, hey, man, don't be surprised, man. I just wanted to keep updating y'all on that. Then tight end wise, the only thing real notable today from the tight ends is the fact that Logan Thomas threw a pass to Sam Howell. So more than anything else, the fun news about that is the fact that Eric Bieniemy's getting in his bag. We about to have some fun trick plays, because you got to remember Logan Thomas was a quarterback all throughout college. So he can sling it. He's not a great quarterback, but he's better than anybody not named Sam Howell, Jacoby Brissett, or Jake Fromm probably on the entire team. So if you want to catch a defense off guard, they won't expect it. And he's not one of those guys just going to loft some stupid pass like, oh yeah, this guy's never played quarterback in his life, like some trick plays look like. Now, Logan Thomas can deliver a pretty nice ball, better than I can definitely throw one. So, and it looked pretty good. I mean, here's the clip right here if you want to see it. Now, the defense didn't even really attempt to cover that one, but Sam Howell caught it pretty smoothly. Like I kind of feel like we can kind of depend on him to make a catch on a trick play like that if we really wanted to. But it's got to be a throw to the sideline so he can get out of bounds. We do not want that guy getting hit at all. And then they ran a similar play again where Logan Thomas threw the ball to Sam Howell later on, and then the defense was not playing with them. They covered him that time. So it's interesting the fact that they ran it more than once. That shows that Eric Bieniemy does want to get the rhythm down for that, and that may be something that we see in a regular season game. And then moving on to the offensive line, of course, like I already said, Sadiq Charles day to day. Chris Paul is just starting left guard right now. But also, my boy Mason, who's there at the training camps, providing great updates and clips from the training camp. He said the offensive line has done a better job, especially on run plays today compared to other practices. Now, again, it's the starting O-line versus the backup defensive line. It was starters versus backups for both sides of the ball, like I already said. But at the very least, that should be some confidence that they could take moving forward. Because if you're always playing the game on the hardest difficulty possible, offensive line-wise, going against, to me, the best defensive line in all of football, I mean, how much are you really learning Like, I mean, there's some element of learning, and then there's an extent of when you just getting whooped so bad, you're not learning anything. You just sitting there getting beat on all day. You're not really learning anything. The butt whooping and the skill gap is just so ridiculously immense that you're just not learning anything. So I think it is good to switch it up for time to time so that the offensive line can actually like fix mistakes and see them actually succeed at certain things, develop that chemistry, and most importantly, that confidence. So when they go in against the starting defensive line, you know, they have something to work with. There's some momentum. There's some, okay, I trust this guy to do that in these situations. When they're going against the best defensive line in football and they're just repeatedly getting whooped on all day, every day, I mean, really, how much are they truly taking from that? I mean, there has to be a sense of hopelessness at times. So some of that confidence they can get from going against that second defensive line unit, which is still really good. We have arguably the deepest defensive line in football as well. The best starting defensive line, I'm probably the best backup defensive line too. So it's not like they're just going against bums. So I think that's pretty good. I'll take that for sure. And then also, Ron Rivera noted how undrafted free agents can stand out in camp. His main word was consistency. He said, quote, if he gets your attention, he's got to do it from that point on. It's the same thing at any position. Is he consistent when he gets his opportunity to play? How does he play? And is he ready to play? Unquote. Like I've already said, undrafted free agent wise, backups wise, depth pieces. If you're not a starter, the reason you're going to make this 53-man roster is that you can handle playing against the starters. So that whole starters versus backups is not an excuse. You need to go out there and look like a starter, because the way the NFL works, just because, say, we have an injury on the O-line and then that backup offensive lineman comes in, it's not like the opposing team that we're going against in a regular season and postseason game is going to bring out their backup defensive line to match up against that backup offensive line. They're not going to do that. So you better be good enough to play against starters, because if you make the 53-man roster, if there's an injury, you're going to be expected to go against starters. You need to play like a starter. So, but Ron Rivera was asked that, and the reason I'm bringing that up in the offensive line portion of this is because Mason Brooks has been put together a really good training camp so far. He stood out every day, and Ron Rivera basically gave you the format to how, as an undrafted free agent, you can find a way to work your way up to this 53-man roster. Just because you're a severe backup, just because you're probably like the 5th or 4th string guard right now, does not mean that Ron Rivera and Eric Bieniemy aren't noticing you making plays. And once you catch their attention once, like Mason Brooks did in those one-on-ones these past couple of days, now that he's doing things in team drills as well, they're definitely monitoring that, and he has an honest chance to make this 53-man roster, and dare I say, even compete for that starting left guard spot that's really up for grabs right now. I love Chris Paul, I really do. I think he should be our starting left guard going into week 1, but it's not like he's just an automatic Pro Bowl, all-pro guy that I'm like, there's no way anybody could take his spot. Mason Brooks goes out there and balls out. You never know if he keeps it up. And then also, as an update for the offensive line, Braden Daniels was working with the third team and was allowed to match up against KJ Henry pretty much all day. Now, KJ Henry was winning the matchup early on at first, like the first few reps, and then Braden Daniels started to come back and started winning some of the reps, and after the day was done, you could honestly say they were about even as far as who won the most reps. Again, KJ Henry was winning the first half. Braden Daniels started winning the second half. So that made me think, is Braden Daniels that good now, or is KJ Henry that bad? Like, did he have that bad of a day? Because I've been hearing Braden Daniels has not been very good just yet. But at the same time, let's go ahead and go to the defensive side of the ball, starting with the D-line. KJ Henry has been pretty good. KJ Henry had a past couple of days of some really good training camp practices, and so now I'm thinking like, okay, so if KJ Henry had a couple of good days, I mean, even against Cornelius Lucas he was winning, who's our backup swing tackle that has had to start for our offensive line a few games the past few years and looked pretty, at the very least decent, sometimes even good. So if KJ Henry was winning against him, I'm assuming that KJ Henry is just where I thought he would be. I thought he would be a really good pickup for us after we got him. And so if Braden Daniels is starting to get better, starting to adjust mid-practice, I think if anything, Braden Daniels just got better. That's, of course, an optimistic glass half full way to look at it, because maybe KJ Henry just had a bad day, and that's why Braden Daniels was able to beat up on him today at a certain point in practice. Who knows, though? We'll just have to see, especially once we start to do the joint practices with the Ravens. We get in the preseason. That's when we start to get more answers. Also, of course, your boy Deron Payne wasn't playing today. He was in the face of Jacoby Brissett and forced him to overthrow a pass to Kyrie McGowan, which was picked off by Cameron Curl. We're going to get into more detail on that play when we get to the DB section, but Deron Payne was the reason for that, and it probably would have been a sack if it was like a normal play where you're allowed to hit the quarterback, but they allowed the play to go on like they always do, and then Jacoby Brissett, with that pressure in his face, tried to deliver a ball kind of late. Cameron Crowe was on it. But again, we'll talk about that and dive into that a little bit more later. Now, as a linebacker update, nothing really notable other than this Jamin Davis situation. I was thinking about making a separate video for this, but I was like, I'll just talk about it in my training camp breakdown. No need to make an entirely separate video, because I also just don't want to talk about it for really long. So we're going to kind of breeze through this anyway, because I just like to talk about the football. I like to talk about when it's off the field. I prefer to focus on positive things, and when it comes to football, I'll talk about the good and the bad. But that's football. That's on the field stuff. This Jamin Davis stuff is not football stuff. It's going to affect football stuff, but it's not directly football stuff. But Jamin Davis was at practice today, which was really interesting because he had to go to court at like 1 p.m. So he had practice from 9 a.m. to like 11:30, 12, and then had to hurry up and go to court for his reckless driving situation at 1 p.m., which was really interesting. I'm surprised he even went to practice under those conditions. But here's an update on his situation. So Jamin Davis agreed to a revised plea deal with the Commonwealth, but Judge James E. Plowman Jr. would not consider it on the basis it wasn't substantially and materially different from the last plea deal that they tried to get away with. So now he has another hearing set for August 31st. So I think he's free from anything court related until August 31st. But the problem is, even though that's good for training camp wise, if he ends up getting convicted and having to go to jail, which is just crazy for a reckless driving case where nobody was hurt, but still, if he ends up doing that now, instead of that affecting training camp, that's going to affect preseason and probably even regular season as well if he ends up going to jail, having to miss time because of that. And then even coming back, I mean, once you go to jail, the NFL is going to suspend you, so he's going to miss time because of that. So we would prefer as fans if we get that out the way now. But I guess the only slight bright side you can look at it as, at least he'll be there for training camp. But I would definitely prefer for him to go ahead and get everything out the way training camp and be available for us in the regular season. But we'll see how it goes. But it's really interesting, like the whole update, like the plea deal that wasn't considered that they tried to do. So this is what Jamin Davis wants. This is not even worst case scenario. This is kind of best case scenario. And the main thing I take from it as best case scenario, 8 days max of jail, but a minimum of 4. So it sounds like this guy hopes to go to jail for at minimum 4 days. That's the best case scenario. So it sounds like he's going to jail. That's crazy. And then he has 6 months of mandatory suspended license, supervised probation for 12 months or longer, a max $2,500 fine, and 114 hours of community service, another driving course, and an essay on reckless driving. That's what he wants, and that's what was denied. So that's the best case scenario. It could even be worse than that. So man, Jamin Davis, hey man, I don't want to talk about it too long, but I wish you the best. I hope for you the best. But that was really stupid how you ended up in this situation, plain and simple. And then moving on to DBs, going back to the good news, that boy Cameron Curl already had 2 interceptions entering today's practice just in training camp alone. And then he got another one on an overthrown ball by Jacoby Brissett. But again, Daron Payne beat the guy blocking him so quickly that he was in Jacoby Brissett's face immediately. But of course, it's not a real game scenario. In a real game, that would have been a sack. But in a practice scenario, they blow the whistle, I guess. But Jacoby Brissett continues to play. Everybody continues. Daron Payne just goes to him, acts like he sacks him, stops, and the play continues and all of that. And then he tried to overthrow the ball to Kyrie McGowan, overthrew it, and Cameron Crowe was right there to pick it off. Great play, man. That was a ridiculous play. Cameron Crowe has been balling out. And just to let y'all know, man, like I keep saying, you better pay him now rather than the 2024 offseason, because the price is only going to go up, and it may even double, because Cameron Curl is due for a ridiculous season. And let this training camp so far, with just only 8 practices, be the foreshadowing of how great of a season he's about to have. We want him to have a great season, but at the same time, the negative of it, if we don't pay him before this regular season starts, that price is about to skyrocket. I mean, just to let you know, shouts out to Nick Ackridge for this from Pro Football Focus, Cameron Curl was the only safety in the NFL last season, out of the entire NFL, to have an at least 80 Pro Football Focus grade in run defense, tackling, and coverage. So you can argue Cameron Curl is the best well-rounded safety out of the entire NFL. And he had an interview with the Scott guy, and he looked like he was saying like, yeah, I deserve to be paid way more than what I'm getting right now on his little rookie deal. So he's even aware of it. That price is only going up and up and up, Commanders. The longer you take, the higher it gets. So we'll see how that goes. And then moving on to Emmanuel Forbes. Well, technically it was Kendall Fuller's press conference, but he talked about Emmanuel Forbes and said how impressed he was and how he's he's been playing faster and stuff like that, which is a great compliment from a veteran like Kendall Fuller. He said, quote, when you first get in there trying to learn the defense, sometimes you allow your mental process to slow you down physically. He's been coming out here mentally starting to pick it up faster, so you see him reacting faster to certain things and routes and things like that. He's definitely improving each and every day, unquote, and that's great to hear. I've been seeing a lot of good clips from him. Now, he has had moments where he's holding on a receiver on a deep ball, and that probably would have been penalized. He's allowed people to get a good release off on him, so he's having to make up in coverage and like kind of close in on him to make the play. But overall, he looks like everything I hoped he'd be, and I'm assuming he's only going to get better and better based on what Kendall Fuller just said. Now moving on, again, nothing for special teams, so we're just going to go ahead and move on to the last few things before we get up out of here. The Commanders reached an injury settlement with safety Xavier Henderson back July 27th, so he got cut. And then another update that happened soon after that, we hosted DBs Mac McCain and John Reed on visits, and we tried out guard Yasir Durant and DB Tay Haynes, and the last name Durant, I don't know too many people with that last name, so maybe he's related to Kevin Durant. And then we also signed Derek Gore, which is probably the most notable out of all of the signings that we're talking about. Now, again, we signed Curtis Brooks to replace David Bada potentially, so that's another interesting signing. But Derek Gore has already been like making plays in training camp. We signed him a few days ago, and I was supposed to just do a whole video on that alone, but I just ended up too busy covering training camp and a whole bunch of stuff. But this guy already has like touchdowns in training camp, running the ball, all of that type of stuff. So, hey man, that's another interesting signing. And then before we get up out of here, just to let you know, today's practice was the final open practice for the fans this week. Tomorrow, they'll be back in full pads, practicing full speed and all of that type of stuff, but only the media will be allowed to go tomorrow, as in Friday, August 4th, just to let you know. The next open practice for fans to attend is Tuesday, August 8th, so you'll have to wait 5 days for fans to be able to go. They're going to continue practicing and doing what they got to do on their end, but the fans won't be able to go again until August 8th, just to give you that fair warning if you planned on going to a practice, or if you're wondering why we're not getting as many updates from these training camp practices over the next few days. Just go ahead and give y'all a heads up. But yeah, man, that's the end of this video. Please get in the comment section, let me know how you feel about everything discussed in this video. Let me know if you agree or disagree with any of my points. If there's anything that I didn't discuss in this video that you wish I would have dove deeper into and talked about more, let me know that as well. And of course, man, please stiff arm that like button, stiff arm that subscription button, and stiff arm the bell next to that subscription button so you get notification each and every time I release an informative and opinionated video just like this one. Also, man, shouts out to all of my supporters, man. Shouts out to all of my sponsors, especially my Pro Bowl sponsors whose name you see scrolling on the screen right now, man. I really appreciate y'all, and I'm gonna hit y'all with another video later on tonight at some point. I'm out.